So this will open the meeting for April 14th. Hate reminders. At 7 o'clock p.m. This is a postponed meeting from last night. So the agenda for yesterday's meeting will still apply for today. This is a Zoom meeting. We're going to record this and it'll be put out on Area 58 for everybody to view after the fact. Kelly will be taking our minutes. There she is. I don't know what I was looking at there for a second. So we'll go right into administrator update. You want to do that now or do you want to do that at the end?
Whatever you want, Alan.
Well, you can feel free to do it now. Actually, Pat Maha just came in, but I don't know where he went. There he is. Hi, Pat.
That's me.
Hi, Pat. Pat. Pat Maha. Oh, there he is, trying to connect to audio. There he is.
Okay. Hi, Alan.
Hi, Pat.
Hi, everybody.
Hi. Hi, Pat.
How's everyone tonight? Hopefully safe and healthy.
Yeah, we're all doing pretty good.
Good.
I've already opened the meeting, Pat, and we've gone to administrator update. We can either do, why don't we go into administrator update and then we can meld right into the reserve fund support on the transfer for capital outlay. So you can bring us into that if you want.
Sure. So Meg's on the line as well. So I'm going to give an update of where we are for FY20 and talk a little bit about FY21 in that particular order. As we all know, we're in this COVID-19. The governor has a restriction up until May 4th. I think everybody's confident that that's going to be extended, whether that's a 2-week extension or some longer period. I don't think anyone's advocating that life as we used to know it is going to be happening on May 5th. So we are anticipating some type of an extension. So what does that mean for the town of Carver? Right now, we've been operating under a restricted staff for all our non-essential employees. Our essential employees, police, fire, and EMS are all fully staffed and functional, as well as our operation and maintenance department. So those 4 organizations have been fully up and running with no downtime during this pandemic. I'm also happy to say that they're not utilizing any extensive overtime during this time period. So it's regular salaries as that's been going on. In support of them, from the town standpoint, we have our finance department that has been actively doing what they need to do. We also have in our permits and inspections department, we have our health agent that's been pretty much full-time, our building commissioner, and support staff making sure that they're able to function. So in essence, what you have is you have the support staff in town hall keeping everything going. Now, with that, several departments have been in essence, not operating at their capacity. One is the library. So that has been, in essence, closed down for the last 3-4 weeks. In addition to that, the Council on Aging facility is closed down, but we are continuing to serve Meals on Wheels. We have about 40 Meals on Wheels that are produced and sent out 5 days a week. Now we are doubling up on that, so some days we send out double meals. So in essence, we're actually providing meals 3 days a week, but they're 5 meals for the week for people. That's consistent with what we've done in the past. We are in the process right now of working with the school, and since the school is already doing school lunches at the same point, right now the COA director is working with determine if it's feasible for the school to provide the additional lunches for the rest of the year through June 30th. And then the COA will continue to provide those meals to people as needed. That'll save down of operating, in essence, 2 kitchens at limited staff and kind of combine resources for that. So we think that that system is going to work, and I'll have that finalized by the end of this week. We're continuing to operate the GATRA bus service, and for those people that do not have the ability of commuting, the GATRA bus service is still fully functional on an as-needed basis, particularly making sure people can get to doctor's appointments as need be. From there, in Town Hall, we still have our O&M department maintaining the cleanliness of the buildings. We did get some donations from Servpro, I believe it is out of Plymouth, that is coming in and providing some major cleaning to our public safety facilities free of charge. But in addition to that, maintaining our operations they're doing, plus continuing certain construction projects, which include the playground and other smaller projects that they're continuing to do. From that's kind of the overview of where Town Hall is. And, as we look into revenue, these are the staff functions that are continuing to operate. But there are many things that aren't being done right now because Town Hall is pretty much on a reduced hour timetable. What I've asked people to do is, in essence, try to come in 2 days a week and where appropriate, work from home the remainder of the week. And that's if you're a full-time employee, and if you're a part-time employee, it's basically 1 day a week and trying to work at home the rest of the time. And again, we're trying to practice social distancing, and that's kind of the real genesis beyond that. Plus, we're really not focusing on non-essential work at this time. So it's everything that's going to require the financial operations of the town to continue to operate, which Meg is spearheading. Let's talk a little bit about the impact of COVID-19. So that's the operation standpoint. Moving forward to the finance standpoint, we see, so as you all know, we like the state have to have a balanced budget at the end of the year. We can only spend money based upon what our revenues are anticipated to be. The only exception to that is snow and ice accounts, where you were able to deficit spend those. Now, during this time of COVID-19, they have passed a special law that allows the towns to deficit spend public safety accounts in their efforts to address COVID-19 issues. So again, that is allowing us to act like the snow and ice account, which you're all familiar with. In addition to that, what they've also stated is that if you do run into a deficit account, they're not going to make us pay that back all at once, that you can actually defer those payments over 3 years before you, in essence, have to pay that amount back. So that does help us with some cash flow and moving some money around if that needed to be the case. As you all know, tonight was supposed to be town meeting. And we would have been in town meeting right now, voting the budget for voting our free cash, making sure there's money available for the police station, moving some money around as you guys have already voted, and we would have voted the 2021 budget tonight too. But obviously that's not the case. We do have June 9th, I believe, is when we have the tentative town meeting scheduled for. And then probably the following week or week after would be the elections, best case scenario. And again, that June 9th may be extended based upon the powers that be that are out of our control. Now, I'm going to focus on finances. With finances, hi, Kevin. With finances, we're going to see some downturn in the following items. One is, just like we have to have a balanced budget, the state does too. The state actually provides a little over $12 million, I think it is, to the town. They're probably going to be cutting back on that in May and June. Even though they have their own rainy day fund with a lot of money in it, they need to maintain their essential services. If we don't see a downturn in state revenue for May and June, we're certainly going to see it for 2021. So that's one area we expect to see a downturn. The second area is on our meals tax, which is about $120,000 a year. We do anticipate seeing a downturn on that. Now, that's usually a 90-day lag. So, right now our last payment was, stuff that happened, before Christmas. And our next payment that we're going to get, which will be, later on this fiscal year, is going to, start to have some impact. And then our first full payment, the next quarter, is going to have the big impact because everything's closed down for restaurants with the exception of takeout. So that's going to be another revenue reduction piece. In addition to that, we expect excise tax, which is when people buy new cars or, and upgrade their vehicles, that those taxes, a portion of those taxes come to each municipality. I think it's about $1.2 million off the top of my head that the town receives for that on an annual basis. Again, going forward, our budget's based upon that. We see that going down. In addition to those items, we also have our permits and inspections, which is our local receipts. Our local receipts, we do anticipate going down as well. There's not as many contractors that can be out there. People are, if they're because of their nervousness financially, may not be doing an addition on their house or doing repairs on their house. So those revenues are going to be going down as well. Now, what we don't know is we don't know the impact of all those. We know those 4 buckets of revenue are going to go down. Meg and I can't sit here and tell you with any certainty, any level of confidence, whether that's a 3% or a 12% reduction. It's somewhere in between. And again, then it's going to be phased. How much of that's going to be in FY21 versus FY20? What we can say categorically is we believe, based upon our professional expertise, is that it is going to go down. So what are we doing about that as it relates to FY20? So with FY20, we put together a spending freeze that Meg instituted about 4 weeks ago. So only necessary expenses are actually going to be paid for the rest of the fiscal year. So that has been going forward. We are blessed to some extent with Mother Nature, is that Mother Nature was not as cold this winter, and therefore we have not used as much natural gas heating our buildings as we may have done in previous years. And this also applies to some utilities too, for electricity and so forth. Even though our newer buildings are all LEDs still take up a little bit of energy, but if they're not turned on, then they don't take up as much. So that's kind of what we have going on for some initial cuts that we did, or initial control. The next thing that we're working on is furloughs. And for the last couple days, and I announced this at the last selectmen's meeting, is, again, we have employees that are home right now because it's the safe thing for them to do. We certainly have our essential employees working in town hall to keep the government working, and all our public safety folks. But there are non-essential employees and again, all employees have a role to play, but there are essential services and non-essential services. So for non-essential services, those could be the library. Those could be some recreation activities. Those could be some of the COA activities, because we can't have bingo right now, but we can serve meals. So, we're looking at all this. And as I've dug into this a little bit deeper, is that the good news is that we have about over 25 employees that have volunteered to go on furlough. Now, whether that's a full-time furlough or a part-time furlough, basically I'm looking at full-time or half-time, based upon whether they work full-time or half-time, is that we've got 25 people that have volunteered to do that. And one person that wants to be told to do it, and that department head has made that decision that, yes, that position is going to go on half-time furlough. So what does a furlough mean? Technically, a furlough is identical to a layoff, except for how you define furlough. So from an unemployment standpoint, a furlough and a layoff are one and the same. from the standpoint of how we're defining furlough is the furlough is we have every intention of hiring these employees back, but we are unable to utilize them at this particular point. Second, if they're in a union position and in conversations with the union, they wanted two things. One, that these furloughed employees maintain their seniority, which of course we're going to give them. And the second is while you're on furlough, and again, with the intent of coming back, the town will continue to cover its share, and again, its share, excuse me, that's a tickle. Probably, I'm just emphasizing tickle. Its share of its healthcare and benefits, and the employee will have to pay its share. Again, whether it's 50-50 or 75-25, that will still remain the same. So that's what we're looking to do. Now, we're going to finalize this list tomorrow, and it could go up to 28 employees. And right now, we're looking at that's going to save the town around $5,000 a week. So that's the savings that we're anticipating with this voluntarily furloughs. So what does this really mean as it looks into the budget standpoint? Now, the good news is, given the federal stimulus that's out there under the recent stimulus bill that was passed that has the care component to it, is that employees will not be harmed financially in this process. And that's really because the federal government is, in essence, whether you're part-time laid off or full-time laid off, you're still going to get $600 a week in addition to whatever your unemployment is. And again, as you all know, unemployment, you basically 50% of what your previous, average salary was for the last 90 days. So we've done all the calculations, and it looks like, every employee, with the exception of maybe a department head, is going to actually be able to earn a little bit more money by going out on the furlough, which is what the federal government is trying to do to kind of separate people. So from that standpoint, the employee is not going to be impacted from our analysis. From the town's analysis and how we came up to the $5,000 figure, remember the town is self-insured. So when we have to lay people off, that means that we have to pay the uninsured, the unemployment insurance, which we have to do in this situation. However, under this federal stimulus thing, two things happen. The first is that the first week is the feds will pay the full unemployment cost of the towns, as we're told and is written in the legislation. The second is the feds will cover half of the town's unemployment insurance. So in essence, the town will be paying a quarter of the salary of our furloughed employees, depending upon whether it's full-time or part-time. And so we're able to save 3/4 of what we normally would have been paying. And hence, that 3/4 times the number of employees times their pay rate gives us a number a little over $5,000 a week that we'll be saving on this. Our intent is to have this furlough go forward until July 31st, and then to reassess where things are at. Now, during this furlough, there may be a need to call back certain people, certain departments earlier rather than later. And when that need triggers, due to the person being potentially reclassified as an essential employee, then we'll make that case. So, for example, one of the employees in the clerk's department has asked to go out on furlough. And for right now, it's probably okay. But when we figure out when the election's going to be and when town meeting's going to be, then they may move up into the priority list of being a priority employee, a essential employee, and have to be taken off a furlough. So again, this allows for some ebb and flow based upon the needs of the town. So, this is something that we're taking advantage of based upon the federal system. I know some other towns have started to talk about this. I don't know to what extent they've done it. But, Meg and I believe that this is the right thing for the town of Carver. Again, I've been talking to the selectmen about it, and they were supportive at the last meeting. And our intent is to make that effective at the end of this week. for those 25 plus employees. So what that's going to do is that we may have to, at the end of the year, make some adjustments to our budget, whether we didn't get, some of the revenues that we anticipated, and we have to reduce down our revenue, which means we have to reduce down our expenses. We'll have the ability of doing that through being proactive, which is what we're trying to do right now with some of these items. The spending freeze. Second is this this furlough program that we're doing, and some other components that we have together. So that's kind of really my update on FY20, and I just want to see if Meg wants to add anything to that and tell me what I missed.
No, actually, I think you captured everything. I mean, it's we have, well, I guess the only other issue that we have is we've covered the revenues, and that revenues are going to be down, and Michael covered all of that. We did touch on the property tax, and property tax, no matter what, is owed to the town. It's just that there could definitely be delays. We could see more properties going into tax title. And although that doesn't mean, there could be a deferral of revenue, and ultimately we collect it, it does create a cash flow issue. And then in terms of the spending freeze, we are starting to see departments submit significantly fewer invoices. I know last week for DPW, they normally have upwards of 40 invoices, and they only had 27. So we're already seeing that people are, for the most part, people are taking it very seriously, and accounting is definitely watching what people are submitting. So I guess that's everything. We covered revenues, covered expenses, and it's just the cash flow is the other aspect of it. But I actually did do a cash flow projection, and we are in pretty good shape. We'll easily get through to the end of the year, and I think Michael's mentioned it before that other towns are actually looking to borrow right now in order to continue to make payroll. But because we're doing extremely well, we won't have to do that yet. But I am constantly monitoring that. Like I'm looking at revenues and expenses and cash constantly. So
let's talk a little bit about cash flow. As Meg mentioned, that she did do a cash flow analysis actually about eight weeks ago when this first thing started. And, we were analyzing where we are. And, as things got worse, then we've put these different mechanisms in play. And as it relates to property taxes, we did have the Board of Selectmen at their last meeting vote to suspend any fines or penalties for people that are late on paying their property or other excise fees until June 30th. So we're not giving them a 3-month window to pay, to not get penalized, provided they have an issue. And there's actually a form that they have to attest to that says, because of COVID-19, there's something that's happened. Whether I'm a self-employed person and I can no longer have, work, whether somebody's lost a job, whether there's a health issue, whatever a reasonable, and I'm going to just leave it as a reasonable justification. If you do that in a test that's causing you not to pay, then we will waive those fees and penalties. It is not relieving people of paying their obligation. Again, our programs and our public safety is based upon everybody paying their tax bill. And if you don't pay your tax bill, you get a fee. And if you don't pay the penalty fee, and then you get interest tacked to that. And then eventually the town is forced to foreclose on that because that money's already been spent. And that's why you're charged interest on that to cover the expenses that are there. So again, we are trying to be empathetic and understand that there are challenges, but at the same time, we still have public safety stuff to do. Now, as it relates to our stabilization, we have over 7.5% tied into our financial management policies of funds into our debt just into our general stabilization fund, $3.2 million. Our budget annual spend for next year is projected to be, what was approved at is a $44 million budget. Now, when we look at that 7.5%, that's less than a month. So if we didn't get any revenue for the town, we can keep paying our bills for a month, and then that's it. And then we're out of money, we're out of stabilization, we're out of everything. That's not a smart thing to do. Now, what we do have is, and we'll talk about this later, is that the Conservation Commission and the Board of Selectmen, at the request of the Conservation Commission, is going to transfer or ask the governor to reallocate $500,000 that's in their conservation fund that's built up recently that can go into our general stabilization. So that puts us up to about $3.7 million. From there are some additional funds that Meg and I have identified that we could get up to, if need be, about $4.4 million of liquidity that we could utilize, worst case scenario, when we could access that liquidity in a short time frame. And again, that's money that's available. That would take a town meeting vote to be able to utilize all that liquidity. But again, it's 10% of our budget, $4.4 million of a $44 million budget. If no revenue came in, then we could, pay our bills for a little bit over a month, and then we'd be out of money. So as much as we have, and as better as we are than most towns our size, if not all, it's still a limited supply of money. And hence, that's also why we've looked at the furlough program, is that if we're able to have the federal government pick up a lot of people's that are non-essential employees fund salaries during this time, it makes all the sense in the world for us to do that while reserving our nest egg, so to speak, until we absolutely have to use it. And if we have to tap into that for the end of the fiscal year, it would be a small number. At this point, based upon what we know today, the answer is we won't have to tap into it. If we get a big hit by the state, which, again, we don't know yet, then that could impact how much we have if we'd have to tap into that. But Meg and I believe that all these actions are going to get us through FY20 relatively painless, that we won't have any major issues that are going to happen. And one other thing I'll say is all capital projects that have already been funded, nothing is stopping with them that are already underway. Again, playground, police station, those are the rebuilding of one of our pumpers or our forest trucks. Those are all in play as we speak, and there's no stopping of that. So I'm going to stop here unless Meg has something else, but this is kind of where we are through FY20. And before I go into FY21, I just want to kind of focus on that.
No, I'm good.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to questions before it seems like we kind of jumped around a little bit, so we might as well just continue on with this same vein. And I'll let anybody else jump in that wants to.
Mike, how's the EMS department doing with PPE supplies?
So far, Tom Walsh is doing very well. Back when we had the previous scare, he was able to load up on a lot of equipment. So he has done that. Our biggest challenge is that we had a sanitizer fogger, and it died, and they can't repair it. They tried, but it's still dead. And we've got 3 on back order. So our biggest challenge is that, which is something that's nice to have because they can fog out, if you will, the ambulance, relatively quickly without having to do a wet spray on everything and having to wipe everything down. But as far as PPEs and so forth, from what I'm told, they have what they need at this particular point.
Okay. I didn't know if the costs were going to start going up on those.
I'm sorry?
Seems like the cost is going up on those. The vendors are starting to charge more.
Oh, yes, they are. And just on that, too, I do know that we did get a bunch of protective gear, like down gear, that was donated, and now we have those with police, and the fire's all set because they have their gear, I believe, but police got a bunch of stuff donated that they didn't have before. But right now, I don't have any indication from Tom or others that they're having any challenges but for the sanitizer fogger.
Okay.
I actually have to get going because I'm actually at work and my lunch break is over. So wanted to say goodnight to everyone.
Before you take off, Kate, do you want to weigh in on you want to do that transfer request real quick, Michael, for the capital outlay?
Yes. So real quickly, again, we were supposed to have town meeting tonight. As you know, in several of the articles, we were moving money into the fire department, to the police station to continue moving that along. Obviously, we're not going to have town meeting to June at the best. So I've got two items that I need to do a change order on. One is for the outbuilding of the police station. The second is tied into the larger fire suppression system, which is also going to create a cistern that will allow us to utilize for the senior housing, the library, and the town hall complex. With that, we need to transfer some money into that account so I can execute a contract. Under municipal law, I have to have funds in order to execute a contract. With that, because town meeting's off, we're not going to be able to make that happen. So with the capital outlay committee, they have about $53,000 in their account. We're asking them, and they're going to approve transferring $200,000 out of that capital and debt stabilization reserve fund into the police station account so we can continue the project without getting slowed down at all. And with that, as you may recall, that takes a vote of not only the capital outlay, but also a vote of the finance committee.
So what I'd be asking for, if unless there's a whole lot more discussion on this, because I know Kate's got to get back, I'd take a motion to support the transfer of those funds contingent on capital outlay approving this themselves tomorrow at their meeting.
I make a motion to support the transfer of funds from capital outlay to the building committee.
I second it.
All right, we have a motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 I think it's unanimous. Okay, thank you, Kate. I appreciate it. I didn't want you locked out of that vote, and it was important that we get it done.
All right. Thank you, guys. Have a good night, everyone.
Good
luck. Stay safe.
Thanks.
So that'll support the capital outlay committee's vote tomorrow. If they choose to do that, you don't have to come back to us. We're all set.
Okay. Hey, Alan, I have a question for Michael. This is
Go ahead.
Patrick. So Michael, I'm fairly new to the committee, right? So first time through the budgeting process this year, and I was really impressed with sort of your overall knowledge of each line item through the budget. We spent a lot of time working through that. I had the heads of the police and fire and DPW in as well, and seems like we're really in healthy shape. That the independent audit came in our last meeting and said as much, right? We had a great review from the internal independent audit.
Sure.
So, and I don't want to put you on the spot here, but obviously we're all dealing with COVID-19 and the impacts. Now we're going to deal with the financial impacts from a personal standpoint and from a town standpoint as well. So we're going to have to make some tough sort of near-term decisions and also create a roadmap, I think, to be for our long-term financial well-being from a town perspective. Mm-hmm. So long story short, and again, I'm not putting you on the spot here, but in our last meeting, we were notified as the meeting began that you were sort of stepping away from this role sooner than later. I forget what the exact date was. But I think we've got some tough decisions upcoming. Like I said, near-term, long-term decisions. I think as the state and the federal government have money for towns, I think towns that react quickest may get that, almost like the small business loans, I'm not sure. But I think the more organized we'll be, the better off we'll be. So that being said, how late could you stay in this current role? Because this is probably a whole different topic. I don't think we're a town right now that should be having 2 town administrators going forward. But I'm curious, with your current sort of contract and obligations, how late could you stay on? Could you stay on till the end of June? in your current role to help us get through these rough seas ahead and create those near-term plans, long-term plans as a transition of some kind sort of takes place. Again, that was kind of long-winded, but wanted to get it all out there. And again, not
So let me share some dates with you just so we have those. All right. So right now, back and I guess it was early March, might have been late February, that the Board of Selectmen and I negotiated a amendment to my contract. And in that amendment, it was for me to stay through April 17th as the full-time town administrator, which is this Friday, and get us through town meeting, which was supposed to be tonight, and make sure that the town was in good financial stead. So when they went forward and hired a new acting town administrator, which was the objective up until this month, that person would walk into a position for X number of months and be the caretaker while they went for a full-time search to hire a new town administrator. So during that period after April 17th is that for the remaining 2 years, I will serve as an executive consultant, an executive TA consultant to the Board of Selectmen as they see or need me to serve in that role. It's a limited role. It's a limited time commitment, but it's at the availability of the town to come in and help whoever succeeds me in this position. So that is what's currently there at this point. I have offered, and it's been discussed in the past, that if the date of April 17th needed to move because of some ebbs and flows of the town manager search or administrator search, that, I think everybody knows me, that I would do what's right and stay on as long as need be. And in what role that would have been, I don't know. But having said all that, the Board of Selectmen did vote this week, it was last Friday, to offer the position to Rick LaFont, who will come in here and he has experience. He's got great financial policies to build on and can carry this role forward. And so, assuming that they approve a contract tomorrow, then April 17th is my last day as town administrator that has the ability of acting as town administrator. Kind of a long-winded question to your long-winded answer, or long-winded answer to your long-winded question.
Yep. All right, and then again with what we're dealing with now with the COVID-19 and I guess the impact to the town, nothing sort of that ship has sailed, I guess, with you moving off and moving off the full-time role of town administrator, I guess, at this point, right? Or
well, I mean, again, a contractual agreement has been done between the Board of Selectmen and I.
Yep.
Obviously, had they not have selected somebody on Friday, and if they were not able to reach a contractual agreement and vote on that tomorrow, then yes, both parties could have amended that and had me stay a little bit longer to satisfy whatever needs are going to be there. But again, it looks like that's all being finalized.
okay, that's too bad. Well, I guess we'll see what it brings. And Alan, I'm sorry to bring that up during this part, but I did want to ask that question
All right.
of Michael while we had him.
Well, let me also say this too, is that Meg's been great. Our finance team in town hall has been great, and for the last 2+ months we knew this date was coming, and as a result of that, we have been trying to be proactive in every step along the way. And one of the things that I pride myself on is always making sure I leave a community better than when I took it over. And that includes up until my last day, which is April 17th. So that's why we're doing all of these programs, so that the successor to me that comes in is going to have a leg up, because in essence, much of the work or the challenges that other towns may still be going through is going to be done already for that person to take that role over. So my hope is that what's done in the next couple days that we've been working on for weeks, and as Meg says, we've been doing cash flow analysis and analyzing this and, 6 ways to Sunday, is that we have, to the best of our ability, kind of preempted what needs to be done for the rest of the fiscal year, and more or less for the first, at least third, if not first half of FY21, which I'll get into later.
Okay.
Michael, do you know, has Brad come up with a savings number yet? Do we have any numbers from what expenses we don't have with this whole shutdown from the schools being closed?
Yes, both the school and the town do have numbers that we have identified. I'm not going to give them out tonight because they're still in flux, but there's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars of savings that will be available at the end of the year. And, normally that would have rolled into free cash. This time it may have to roll into dealing with a revenue shortfall, which best case scenario means that we don't have a deficit this year, that we have to tap into our stabilization fund. So I'm optimistic that between what Brad has done, and the school's been doing a great job. I want to make sure everybody understands, is the school has been doing what they can to eliminate costs they don't need to spend right now, that we'll be able to identify this as we go forward.
Thanks. Adam, are you jumping in, or you?
Well, yeah, I had a question along the lines of Patrick's question with respect to, you moving on and someone else coming in. I noticed that the select board is scheduled to have a discussion tomorrow morning at 11:35 about a vote to transfer funds to the town administrator line item. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? What that means and what the implications of that are?
Sure, absolutely. So a couple things. One is, as I mentioned before, with the vote you took earlier tonight with the police station account, is that in order to execute a contract, I need to make sure that there's funds in a line item to now allow me to sign the contract, so it's a legally binding contract. The same thing is with the Board of Selectmen, is that they have a town administrator account that the town administrator is being paid out of. And I have to be paid out of that for the next 2 years. So when they hire the next town administrator, they have to add funds to that account for the rest of this fiscal year so that the contract can be properly executed, which means that there's funds in there. Now, when you guys had a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen, we were planning on a town meeting, again, occurring tonight, and there was $99,000 that was in there out of free cash to begin that process. Well, we can't, that $99,000 doesn't exist yet because town meeting can't vote on it. So that has to be pushed off. So in essence, in order for their contract to be legally binding for the rest of this fiscal year, is we have to put funds into that. And that's what that vote is. Now, where is that money coming from? I'll get to in a second. But from a process standpoint, is the way our budgets are set up. And just like we did last year, if you remember last year at the end of the fiscal year, is Meg and I were able to look at where we had savings within certain categories of budget. So I'm just going to talk on the general government. There's a general government, there's a school budget, there's a public safety budget. There's like 6 different budgets within our big budget. Within those budgets, and again, focusing on general government, is that we're able to move money between one line item to the other line item, again, not exceeding the total amount for that piece. I don't have the total amount in that whole budget there, but again, for the general government, like we did last year, is that Meg and I just, we move money around with the approval or the concurrence of the Board of Selectmen within that line item. What we can't do is we can't move money from one category to the other category. We can't move public safety money into shared expenses, or shared expenses into general government, or general government into the school budget. We can't do that without a two-step process, a two-step checks and balances. But within the main bucket, we're able to move money between line items as long as we don't exceed that. So with that, we've identified 3 items, and these are my numbers, that I'm anticipating that we need to transfer somewhere in the mid to high $20,000 number to allow a contract that I have yet to see, but just dealing on past understanding of where these contracts should be, to provide funding through the end of the fiscal year. But we're putting a little contingency in that. So I have 3 line items that I'm going to be recommending tomorrow for the Board of Selectmen to approve from Meg and I. And it's really a finance director and a town administrator call on this, but we always disclose this to the Board of Selectmen and get their concurrence on it, because we don't want to move money without people knowing about it. So there's 3 categories. One is propane. Again, heating season was down this year. So we have what we believe is an additional $10,000 in the natural gas. It's really the natural gas account. It's mostly natural gas, but we call it propane account. So we're moving $10,000 from there. In our street light account, we have $6,000 that we believe is going to be surplus at the end of the year based upon our forecast. And then for our telephone account, we have $18,000. Now you may ask, well, that's a lot of money, $18,000 to move out of your telephone account. Don't you know what your telephone account is? And the answer is yes and no. Yes, we always knew historically what the telephone account was when we had a whole bunch of these copper lines. But we were fortunate with some of the savings we did with the elementary school was we upgraded our whole fiber optic system in the town and was able to put voice over data. And in that process, we were able to eliminate a lot of copper lines that went into town hall and into some of the town buildings. So we're now able to use the internet for many of the phone calls versus having each individual line or phone in each office have its own copper line. So when that was budgeted, we anticipated there will be some savings in here, and it's turned out that there are savings. So that's $18,000. So those 3 numbers, the $10,000, the $6,000, and the $18,000, add up to $34,000. And that's what Meg and I are recommending to move into, to add to the town administrator account so that the board can legally approve the new contract for the town administrator. In future years, because they're in a future year, is that those funds have to be included in the budget, and I'll get to that when we get into FY20.
So is it judging by your, and I appreciate the answer, judging by your explanation, is it common or uncommon for the Board of Selectmen to make these types of decisions, the votes to transfer funds? I just don't recall it. Now, I don't look at every agenda, and I watch probably 95 to 99% of the meetings that are televised on YouTube. But I don't remember this being common practice for the select board to take these votes.
So, yes, it is common practice since I've been doing the budget in the town. And when you go to the budget booklet, and I am just going to pull mine out so I have the right number that I'm quoting here once I find my specs so I can see the damn thing. So if I go to, figures. I've got, here, I can find it here. So, give you an example. So in general government, last year, so the 2019 budget was $2.6 million, the original budget that was in there. So out of that $2.6 million budget, and again, this is all general government. This is basically town hall. This is also the library and COA. Is that all general governments fall in that line item? Within that line item, that's the number that's approved at town meeting. And that's the number that Meg and I are held to, is to make sure that our budget comes in those line items. So again, last year, we generally make these changes in a June timeframe, a late May, June timeframe. If we go back and look at a couple agendas from last year, you'll find one or two. And again, it's the town administrator, the finance director, that's really given notice that we're moving money within that $2.6 million number from legal to gas, or gas to something. And in essence, that's what we're doing here. So normally it doesn't happen that many times because we're pretty good in our budget forecast. And it's only when we deal with anomalies or something that's a little random at the end of the year that it'll happen. You know, obviously this expense we didn't budget for. And, you know, in order to do the contract, I have to put money into it.
Right.
So I guess I'm answering your question is it common? Yes, we do it at the end of every fiscal year following this process. And that's really the answer that I have to your question.
Okay.
Now, if this was a bigger number that we couldn't move within this number, again, I'm talking, what did I say, $34,000 out of a $2.6 million line item. You know, it's not a big number from that standpoint, so we have the bandwidth to do that. If
Right.
it was a bigger number that we didn't have it, then that may trigger that we'd have to go into 3 or 4 different categories to find it, or to general stabilization, or to something else.
Okay. Thank you.
So Mike, I just want to make sure I have this right. The 34,000, that's like 2.5 months worth of salary?
So, yes, it's like 2.5 months of salary. Now, what I do anticipate is generally when anybody comes in from a town administrator position is that they have to give proper notice where they're leaving, and that can be, you know, generally it's a 30-day thing. So when Rick comes into play, assuming that all goes forward as it's anticipated, he won't be here full-time 5 days a week, 35 hours a week. He'll be here something less than that while he'll be doing both jobs. And so it's not going to be a full salary thing for that 2.5 months. But yes, that's what I'm looking at. So it's a little less than 2.5 months when I'm calculating that out. And I would really suggest don't try to back into a number with that 34,000 because that's kind of my number. I think it's going to be in the upper 20s. And that's based upon him being part-time for the first month. We'll all find out what that number is. The only thing that, you know, I just hope that I believe that number is adequate to cover it.
Michael?
Thanks, Mike.
Yes.
You too, Beth. I'm going to interrupt. I promised Ron I would read a disclaimer, and he's afraid of everybody doing exactly what you just did, Beth. So it says,
Sorry.
We all did it, Beth.
It says, thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
If you could provide a disclaimer stating that this figure is not tied to any negotiations, and it's just an effort to have something to cover what may be needed, and is likely more than is needed, that would be appreciated. Some folks may try to do fractional math to determine what the figure corresponds to annually, and that could complicate negotiations. So I fulfilled my promise to Ron Clark. I've read you the disclaimer. It's right here. And now you can go ahead and do all the fractional math you want, but I did my part. They don't want anybody to start backtracking the number. I understand what Michael was doing. We couldn't come up with an absolute number because that would be unfair to the negotiations. The contract as of this moment is not signed. I have no knowledge of what's potentially in that contract, but we're not going to meet again to have this discussion. So this was more, frankly, I see this as an FYI because for whatever reasons the powers that be have, this is a discussion that it really has nothing to do with us.
Yep.
Do I agree with that? I do not. But that being said, it has nothing to do with us. Pat, did that answer your questions?
It did, yes.
Adam, you're all set? I didn't get a chance to say hello to Kevin and George. Hi, George. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, Alan. Sorry I'm late.
No. I'm glad you're here.
I'm still trying to get used to the new light being out here at 7
I
o'clock at
hate
night.
this. I hope we never do this again. I hope this is the one and only time that we have to do this.
Unfortunately, it won't be.
No, I won't.
Well, not happy. Beth told me it wouldn't too. She told me yesterday, so.
So any other questions on FY20 budget, the funding for the new town administrator, the fact that that's being the additional line item, what we're doing for the furloughs, any other questions on that?
Yeah, Michael, on one of the things on the furloughs, and I apologize for being late again, but I know we're looking at money from the feds. Is that a short-term turnaround, or are we going to see that sometime around 2022?
Well, I don't know. I can't answer that question. So I guess part of it is, we don't know. But what happens normally when somebody files for unemployment from the government, from a town,
Right.
is the state pays them. Then the state comes back and asks us for reimbursement sometime after the fact. And again, that could be many, many weeks, months later. At the same time, the feds are giving the money to the state. So we're hoping that the state just gives us a bill for 25% versus 50%. We're hoping that's how that plays out. But we don't know yet.
Is that all spelled out in the CARES Act?
It's
Is
not.
that where that's coming from?
Go ahead, Meg.
The reimbursement part is not, because I actually checked with legal counsel today to ask them how we would submit for reimbursement, and he literally said that hasn't been determined yet, but that he would keep me in the loop as it's kind of rolled out.
Okay.
The first week and the 25% is spelled out in the CARES Act. It's just the implementation process differs by state to state, because they defer to how the state unemployment offices work. So we don't know how that's going to work in the state. So, George, I hope it's not going to be like FEMA reimbursement.
Yeah, I know. That's where I'm coming from.
Yes. But you know what? That's something, because of our financial wherewithal, that we have cash flow, that as long as we know it's coming in, we can budget for it accordingly.
Okay.
So, Michael, is the EMS department, can they access that CMS advance payment?
Can the EMS access that?
Yes, CMS.
I think that's what Tom Walsh had sent. He had sent me an email about some funds that he was supposed to receive. Honestly, I'm not really familiar with what it is.
Well, there's two different funds you can receive. One was just they take your revenue off your PSNR and they'll put it right into your bank account.
Yeah.
And the second one is that, and with that one, you don't have to pay it back. The second one is with CMS. It's called an advance payment.
Yeah.
So you can apply for that. So you take your revenue Medicare would have given you over 3 months, and they'll give it to you right now ahead of time. And then in 6 months from now, you can just hang on to it and pay it back.
Yeah.
So that one's like a loan.
Moments like this, because I could just say it's above my pay grade, and Elizabeth and Meg, you guys can figure that one out with Tom.
No, believe me, Tom's already all over it. No, yeah.
Well, I've applied for both already if he needs help with it.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Because I know his concern at this particular point was whether there were any strings attached to it, because he just wanted to know when the money came in, because I think his idea is if there's strings attached, he doesn't want it.
Was that the deposit that came in Friday?
I don't know, because the treasurer collector's office right now is looking for it, so I don't know if it's come in yet.
So Friday, almost everybody in Massachusetts received it.
Okay, and that's the one that you have to pay back, or you don't?
No, that's the one you do not have to pay back.
Okay.
You just at the end of this have to tell them how much you've spent on COVID-related expenses.
Okay.
The one you have to pay back, you have to fill out a form for it.
Okay. Oh, so then chances are you have to fill out a form for it. So chances are that's exactly what you're talking about then.
Yeah, that's the advance payment.
Okay.
Hey, Meg,
Yeah.
why don't we see if we can set up a call with Beth and Tom and you,
Yeah.
and just kind of walk through this because, Tom's gotten burnt before with strings attached, so he's a little bit shy of that. And
Yeah.
Beth, we've already gone through this. We can just, triple check to make sure that everything is happening here, with your expertise.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah, I don't mind. I've already applied for both of them.
Great.
Yeah, Beth is the one to go to because she knows where all that money is hidden.
Yeah, some of it. Some of it gotta pay back, though.
Yeah, you need to be a Philadelphia attorney in order to get the paperwork filled out. They call it streamlined. There's only going to take 5 hours to do the application instead of the usual 12.
Yeah.
So,
Well, they might as well jump on it because you can hold the cash in your own bank account in case you need it and then pay it back at the end.
cool.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sounds good. Thanks.
you guys hook up. That'll work out good.
Yeah, let me know.
Okay. Absolutely. Thank you.
Anybody else on FY20? You want to go into FY21, Michael?
Sure. Again, everything I've said in FY20 is going to apply to FY21. This furlough is going to help FY21. We are going to have a revenue, shortfall in FY21. We don't know what that's going to be. So what we have, we have made one change to the operational budget that I presented at the two selectmen's meetings ago, or last selectmen's meeting ago, that we're going to table moving forward with the community living department, which would have consolidated the library, the COA, recreation, and veterans, which, again, I believe is a great idea. So do the department heads. But that did bring up a lot of controversy, that we don't need right now. And it was going to have a price tag of about $39,000-$40,000 to make that. And again, we think that investment was well worth it. However, what we are going to do is just not do that org chart change. So we're going to keep the organization the same in FY21 as it was in FY20. However, we're not proposing to change that budget line item by the $39,000-$40,000. We're proposing to leave that in there for right now. And the reason is because, again, we don't know, and nor will we know by June 9th, how much to change the budget, how much our revenue shortfall is going to be. What we're telling everybody is there is going to have to be an adjustment. There's going to have to be a special town meeting that we normally don't have prior to the April town meeting next year to make these adjustments. So what are we doing to not spend money that's been approved in the budget? Because we know we're going to have to give some back. So first is effective July 1, it's proposed to have a mandatory spending freeze for any unnecessary. I mean, obviously anything the government spends money on is technically necessary, but any non-essential expenditures need to have a spending freeze. The furlough should continue through July. And then at that point, the new town administrator will have to determine if they can release it, bring some employees back, or they need to extend it. And again, we already know there's going to be $40,000 in there from this community living department. That's not going to happen. So we're trying to build some items that are in there because in that time frame, there is going to have to be some approval to transfer money into the new town administrator account. And one of the items that we have is we had originally had the $99,000 that would go into a fund because we thought we'd be having a town meeting tonight. And then next week, you can figure out where that fund's going to be. But at this point, we're going to propose putting that $99,000 into the new TA account for FY21 and just putting it directly in there because you're going to have to actually pay for that salary in the budget. And once the contract's executed, and I say this just because It's how 4 contracts work in the town, actually 5. The town administrator, the finance director, the police chief, the fire chief, and sometimes the library director. And in Carver's standpoint, it is the library director because it's from a library board of trustees, is those expenses have to be paid. So you have to figure out how to put money into those accounts before the year ends. So moving that $99,000 in there is a way to jumpstart that, at least get you through, probably more than the first half of the year. So you can actually figure out where the rest is going to come from at that later date. So that's kind of what we're looking at for FY21. Again, we don't have any good information to tell you what our revenues are going to be down, except that we're making everybody aware they're going to be down, and we're going to try to control spending until that happens. Now, with that, we do have, again, potentially $4.4 million in our stabilization fund. And again, I'm not proposing that we run that down, but I'm proposing that you may want to use that next year because it may make a lot of sense to use that. Now, what is our $44 million revenue shortfall going to be? Is it going to be $300,000, $600,000, $1.2 million? We don't know. But if we're confident that it's going to be a one-year issue and that in FY22, we're going to be back into the real world again, and again, you think it's going to be a one-year hit, then you pay for it out of stabilization, assuming the economy is going to come back in 2022. If the town and the finance committee and others don't feel confident that it's going to come in there, then you may have to start to do some additional cuts in the FY21 budget rather than just use the stabilization to fill the hole. But again, by doing this furlough program that we're doing right now, by putting in the spending freeze, we're preempting the day of reckoning and lessening the impact of the day of reckoning when that happens. And when that day of reckoning does come from, whether it's $600,000 or $1.2 million, we have the money available. It's just how much of that do you want to use? And, we're hoping it's going to be a one-year impact, but we don't know. All indications are they're coming back with treatments. They're going to have a vaccine for this. Life's going to be better in 2021, 22, but we're not there yet. And hopefully that'll all come to play. Knock on wood. We live in a healthy, world again, and the economy will bounce back. But we're taking the precautions to put the next town administrator, you guys, and the legacy of our financial plans in good stead.
I have to assume that we're still going to have obviously a reduced diesel fuel bill because the buses haven't been running for however many months it turns out being. We're going to have some turnbacks in the snow budget because thanks to me buying a plow, we haven't plowed a drop of snow since I put the plow in the truck in December, so you're very welcome. So we have a bunch of money in that account we haven't used. So I'm assuming there's going to be some additional turnbacks. In the bright side of this is going to be some savings. So I'm hoping that doesn't create a worst case scenario. And I obviously hope that this thing is, I'd like to see this wrapped up and put away by the end of May, but I'm optimistic when I say that. So.
Okay.
So the answer to your question is Alan, that yes, there are going to be savings. We mentioned those savings, and that's why I think as we close out FY20, all of those savings are going to resolve any shortfalls in revenue we're going to have in April, May, and June. Short of some draconian state aid cutback, which I don't see happening this quickly, but that's the only thing that would negate what I've said is, again, a draconian cutback in state aid.
I think I can for now.
Michael, is the town taking a look at all our small businesses in town to see if any of them are going to have to drop out, close up shop, or anything that's going to affect our revenue next year too? I'm just wondering.
So, George, the answer to that is that yes, I mean, obviously all local businesses, all restaurants, they're all struggling.
Right.
But the way our tax structure works, it's based upon the real estate. And whether they pay the real estate bills now or they're late, at some point, the town has an obligation, because our budget's based upon them paying their full and equitable share, that will collect that. So it's a cash flow issue versus a overall collection issue. So the major impact the small businesses are going to have is on our meals tax,
Right.
and potentially any type of, renovations, improvements in the near future.
As far as permits and so forth goes.
What's that, Alan?
I says, as far as permitting, you mean?
Permitting, yes. Permits, yes.
Also, I would expect a slowdown in the second quarter, or for us, I guess it'd be the fourth quarter real estate taxes. As far as that gets a little bit sluggish coming in, especially for some of the commercial businesses that are impacted by this thing too. So, I mean, they're still going to owe the money. Granted, we're going to give them the break off the interest and penalties, but that general revenue may be slow in coming.
Correct. And again, let's just take a step back and understand the whole purpose of the tax. And again, we've got the Brady Bunch picture right here, and everybody on these screens has contributed, pick a number, $10,000 in taxes. And with that, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11, that $110,000 is budgeted. And all of a sudden, if Alan, you're not paying your $10,000, we're not going to go back to the other 10 people and say you pay 11,000 versus 10. We're holding you responsible for your $10,000 allocation. If you don't pay it on time, because this Brady Bunch picture has all agreed we're paying $10,000, and the budget's based upon that for police and everybody else, you're going to have to pay penalty fees and late fees, and then interest. And then if you still don't pay it, as cruel as this sounds, is the government's going to come in and take your land. And the government's then going to sell it at foreclosure. And the first person to get paid back is the government for your initial $10,000, because the town had to either use its other savings to pay your $10,000 or had to borrow. For towns that don't have good financial policies, they're now borrowing your $10,000 and they have to pay interest back on that. So, I mean, that's the whole premise of how the thing works.
I thought I had read somewhere that the way the CARES Act worked was your mortgage company would front load the taxes if you took that 3-month deferment. And then, so the town would still get paid, and then that would be on the mortgage company to collect from the homeowner.
So, Beth, that's our understanding for some of this. And,
Okay.
most people are paid through the mortgage company. So I would not anticipate many mortgage companies writing a letter saying we're having a hardship.
Yeah.
Because that hardship should be done with the mortgage company. It's really the people that may own their properties outright that we want to hold that accountable to. But you're absolutely right. The federal government's doing these programs anyway with people in general.
Yeah.
But, we as a town still have to pay our bills, and we don't want to tap into all of our reserves when we have people that can afford to pay. So in other words, if I'm a police officer in town and I live in town, I'm still getting my paycheck and I should be able to pay my bills. I shouldn't get the delay.
I agree.
Anybody else?
One question I had is, given the delay in town meeting now, we from October to February went through all the different fiscal year 21 budget requests, met with all the individual departments, went through that fiscal year budget, operating budget line by line, and approved everything and sent it on. But now that town meeting's been delayed, has there been any discussion about revisiting that fiscal year 21 budget specifically for those expenses that we now know are imminent and not the dollar amount might still be up in the air, but the cost of a new town administrator contract is a known expense. So what types of discussions have you had with the select board or anyone about potentially revising the fiscal year 21 operating budget to accommodate for those expenses?
So the only thing that I have had and quite honestly, it's Meg and I kind of forecasting what the needs are going to be, is again moving that $99,000 that was in free cash, that's coming out of free cash, and putting that rate into the new town administrator budget line item, and that'll cover you for at least the first half of the year for that salary, and then you'll have to look at other mechanisms to fund it the rest of the way. So again, it was really the objective to get you to the special town meeting, and then figure out where to go from there.
So has there been any consideration, because when we approved this operating budget, this wasn't known. But now it is a known thing. And we have the time now where we're sort of stuck in purgatory waiting for town meeting, where we could do the analysis. We could look at the operating budget. We could try to maybe reprioritize the needs and find a way to add this $200,000 to the operating budget, so that it's budgeted for. And it's not something that has to be done with a town meeting later on. To me, it just seems like we've got the time now to sort of look at this. Not that you and emergency management aren't inundated with other priorities, but town meeting didn't happen as expected. So the calendar has provided us with some opportunities here to look at what we now know will be probably by tomorrow morning at noon. We'll know what that expense is going to look like. It makes sense to revisit the operational budget and try and reprioritize to fund it through the budget.
So Adam, that would be the best case scenario for that to happen. And I do think that there will be some time to do that, probably in a May, early June timeframe, and try to look at that. I'm just going through what we have right now. And since I, like you, don't know what the final number is, I just know it's north of $99,000 and south of $200,000 that, we do have the 99,000, which is the easy, fruit to pick to put in there. But certainly the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee, should be looking at that, because you are going to have time, like you said, prior to when town meeting is eventually going to happen, whether it's June 9th or some later date. So yes, there will be time to do that. It's just that for right now, that's all that I have at this particular point.
Yeah, and I think I had asked, I'd sent some questions to the chair with respect to funding this budget, this specific issue within the budget for fiscal year 20, 21, and 22, if the contract proceeds as was discussed during the select board meeting on April 10th. So if they proceed with a 2-year contract, this is something that's going to affect not just this year's operating budget, but the operating budget for the next 2 years.
That's correct.
So it's something that since this was dropped in our laps, has been a concern of mine, because as it relates to the Finance Committee specifically, we have a fiscal and fiduciary responsibility to really peel back the layers of the onion and try to understand how we're going to fund this, because it's not just a matter of replacing Michael Milanowski in body, but also now funding a second Michael Milanowski within the budget, which is extremely difficult. Yeah, it's very, very difficult. And that was before COVID-19 tightened the belt on our revenue stream. And what's $99,000 in free cash is great, but there's going to be other financial demands on this town in the next 2 years that weren't anticipated prior to that contract being negotiated. And yet we're in a position now where we are negotiating a contract for a new town administrator. And I get the feeling that we haven't revised our approach or thought process with respect to the financial impact of a second town administrator since COVID-19, yet we're making the decision to move forward with hiring a second town administrator because of COVID-19. And I hope I articulated that correctly. But
No, I think you did. In my comment, that's scary is when you said there were going to be two of me. Some people had one is enough for some people. Listen, you're absolutely right. There's going to be two positions funded out of one line item for a period of 2 years, and that's just what it is. You do have the ability of meeting with them. The time is ripe to finalize whatever that salary is going to be. Whether I don't even want to throw numbers out, but again, north of 99 and south of 200, whatever that is, you do have time to figure out, because we're in a pay-go system, so something's going to have to be cut out of the FY20 budget to do it. Now, earlier tonight, I mentioned about the community living department, and that's $39,000. Well, guess what? That's the next easiest fruit to pick. And you're moving that $39,000 over into the town administrator's budget. And then whatever the delta is, you'll have to figure out what that's going to be. But again, there's still the bigger picture is what's the revenue shortfall going to be for 2021 that you're going to have to put into that. So I guess, again, this is a town board of selectmen finance question as to where the money's going to come from. To your point, you have time to do that before the next town meeting. And beyond those two figures that I've just mentioned, there's still going to have to be some smaller delta for the full year that's going to have to be allocated and figure out where that's going to come from. And again, that's all assuming there's no revenue cutback, which we all know there's going to be.
I want to remind this committee that we voted at the joint meeting with the select board, Article 3. We took that item G out and made it its own article, that we're going to spend that $99,000 in a joint vote with the Board of Selectmen. Now, if this is going to be another way for them to continue to circumvent the Finance Committee and get some more money into an account all by themselves, and then we're going to pull the $39,000 out of. It looks like we're spending money here and no one is bothered to ask anybody where the hell it's coming from. And I think this is what Adam's trying to get to. And I think that that's going to become a real big problem because nobody reached out except to Meg and you, Michael, to ask if they even did that as to where this was going to all come from. Yet you come to us tonight and you're asking for a transfer of funds in order for you to execute a contract. And we gave you that money to do just that. But apparently that only applies to you. So I think this is where, and I'm speaking for members of my committee. This has nothing to do with who got put in the position. And I want to make sure that that is adamantly understood. This has to do with the position. That this town is going to open a budget package next year and see what could be potentially a $380,000 number in a line item. And then we're going and telling people how we're furloughing and freezing budgets. And I'm getting a lot of nodding of heads here. So I don't think I'm speaking out of school.
no, that's exactly what my concern has been since day one. And again, my concerns originally were just, and I shared this at prior meetings, I hate to keep revisiting it, but we spent 6 hours discussing $40,000 for the education budget to salvage a part-time art teacher. Here we're talking 4 or 5 times that number. And it's sort of just like, oh, well, we'll figure out how to find the $160,000 to $200,000 to fund a second town administrator. It's not easily accomplished. And at the same time, the Board of Selectmen tomorrow, not unilaterally, but unilaterally is making a decision to commit these funds to another town administrator. And I in a perfect world, I wish there was more of a, and I said this before too, a plan in place with respect to how we're going to fund a second town administrator before we go commit to funding one. Michael, for 6 years now, you've not gone into a single project without a plan or a roadmap to fund that project. There wasn't a single project that you said, hey, we're gonna commit to building a $29 million elementary school, but we're not really sure how we're gonna fund it, but we're gonna sign the contract and move forward, and then we'll deal with funding it later. And unfortunately, that's how we're approaching the town administrator contract right now. Is we're not really sure where the money's going to come from, but we're going to find it. And it's a little troubling to me when there were more cost-effective options available. And I'm not my feelings are not about who was chosen or any of that sort of stuff. We do not have that level of oversight as a FinCom, but I think certain financial considerations would have come from us as part of our due diligence and our fiduciary responsibility. There's certain financial aspects that we would have highlighted or put a little bit more emphasis or stress on that I don't think was done specifically by the Board of Selectmen. I think they took it into consideration to some extent, but I don't think it was driving the decision. I think the lack of I don't want to get into process because again, we don't have that level of oversight, but the way the process was actually carried out limited our options financially. And at the end of the day, an option has currently been chosen that is arguably the most expensive option. And again, we still don't have a plan. And one hasn't been discussed yet. But to my knowledge, between the Select Board and the Finance Committee, the Select Board has not requested a joint meeting. There hasn't been any discussions with FinCom, to my knowledge. Mr. Chair, please correct me if I'm wrong, about working together to try and outline some sort of blueprint for how this is going to be funded. And yet they're committing to a contract theoretically tomorrow morning. So that's where my concern's coming from. And I'm sorry if I'm being long-winded, but that's where this is coming from. It's what we didn't know 2 months ago, we now know is a reality, yet we've done nothing in the last 2 months as part of this search to highlight a roadmap or a blueprint to pay for a new town administrator. And yet we're going to start writing checks tomorrow, which sounds like a great idea in the minds of some.
Can I just ask, when I read the email from Ron Clark that Alan forwarded, it said his term would be for 2 years. Is that normal? It just seems like a long time to have an interim.
So in my experience is when you're hired, well, let me put it this way. I'm going to be careful how I answer this. As of April 1st, as of the beginning of April, the process was to hire an acting town administrator for a short duration while the search for a full-time administrator was ongoing.
That's what I thought we were going to do.
Yeah, and that's what the process is. Normally,
so theoretically, not to interrupt, Michael, but theoretically, a $99,000 would have been enough to solve that problem.
That's how we left it, Adam, in our last one. So this is kind of
Sorry, Michael, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'll let you finish, but that would have solved the problem in fiscal year 20.
Well, I think part of the $99,000 was to hire the search firm to come in and assist and bring in a pool of candidates at that particular point. And again, the selectmen have the sole authority to choose who they pick. And I really don't want to get into an issue because I wasn't privy to the executive sessions when that action changed from a two-step process with an acting to a full-time. So I don't know what happened there, so I'm not the person to ask that to. But to your question, generally you have acting town administrators serve 3, 6, 9, maybe 12 months, and that's what they serve while there's an issue going on. Now, having said that, many acting town administrators, because they do a good job, he or she may be hired to extend that contract and go into a full-time contract, but it generally starts off at something, in a shorter time period. Again, we're in a little bit different time here, and the selectmen have made a decision, it appears, and I think we're all waiting to see what the contract amount is and duration of the time, which apparently can be up to 2 years for a fixed contract.
And will we be receiving an invoice from the Collins Center for the search?
I was told that this was free for an acting town administrator search.
For an acting.
Well, for an interim town administrator search is what we were told.
Yeah.
If it was interim and we chose off the list, there was no charge from the Collins Center.
Right.
Right.
But when
But there would have been a charge for a full-time.
Right, exactly. So there would be a charge for a full-time administrator, which I would expect would have been part of the deal. If we give you someone interimly, and then I was told that was not correct. So I don't know. I don't know.
I remember when I was hired for the town of Carver is that we actually had to pay the invoice, or I had to sign off on the invoice to pay that went through the process of hiring me. And, you know, for those that were around at that time, is the Collins Center did a recruiting effort. I think they might have had 20 candidates or 30 candidates that they narrowed down to 10 with the screening committee. The screening committee had an executive session interview with, I think, 10 of us that they actually interviewed. Of those 10, I believe it was they picked 4 to go in front of the Board of Selectmen, and I was one of the 4 that went in front of the Board of Selectmen in that multi-step process. That's typical what happens.
My experience, like these type of companies usually charge you a percentage of whatever salary they can negotiate. Do you know what the percentage?
Yeah, in municipal world, it's usually a fixed fee.
It is,
That
okay.
they do, yeah. There's not generally a percentage. And then they usually have a rider that if the person doesn't last there 6 months, they'll give you a free search after that. So they
Okay.
stand behind it. But in municipal world, it's usually a fixed fee.
Fixed fee.
I think, Beth, I think you're thinking more of a headhunter. And the headhunter firms, usually that's it. It can be as much as 2 times an annual salary. Depends on when you get up into the executive levels. A friend of mine is one down in South Carolina, and he gets, sometimes it's 1.5 times, 2 times an annual salary is his fee. If you find the right guy, you know?
Based on the fact that this is going to be a 2-year, we're assuming a 2-year contract, we're going to end up paying the Collins folks for this because they said that there would be no charge for an interim TA, but there would be a charge for a permanent one when they did the search for that.
Or perhaps
So I'm assuming they're going to give us.
Yeah, I don't know how they're going to come out with all of this because we don't know what this new town administrator is really, quote, called right now. We don't know if we don't know any of that. So you can look at social media and you see one definition, and you can look at and talk to a couple of selectmen and you hear a different definition. So honest to God, I don't have any idea what this guy's title is. Interim, permanent, temporary, part-time, full-time. I don't know. We'll find that all out when it's time to find that all out.
And if I could just have a quick little timeout here, is that the person that they've offered the position to is a nice guy, and I think he'll do a fair job. And I would just encourage you is he didn't set up the process. The process he went through just like 3 other people, and he was selected through the process. So assuming he executes a contract is that, you know, he was hired through a process like the other 4. Whether you like the process, not like the process, whatever it may be, it's not his fault. And I would just ask everybody to give him a fair shot when he comes in and you know, go from there.
I don't think we were trying to blame him. It just seemed like we changed the rules in the middle of the game.
Well,
And it got a little bit confusing. That's why I don't watch social media anymore either.
I want to make sure that we do not get caught up in personalities and names. I said before, I truly believe that it is the selectman's job to hire the town administrator, and it is our job as a FinCom to work with them. And that's the benefit of the doubt that we give. And if we find out that 6 months from now that the individual, no matter who they were to put in the spot, that is impossible to work with, then obviously there's an issue. But until we discover that, we have to go in with the same open mind that we do in dealing with Michael now. So, and that's my intent. And I assume that that's everyone here's intent also, is to go forward. And I don't personally know the gentleman. I know Pat Maha does. The fact is that I'm certainly going to give him the benefit of the doubt and work with him as best we can, because our interest is not in who the town administrator is. Our interest is in the best interest of the taxpayers of Carver. That's who I'm watching out for. You know.
Alan, sorry, quick I guess, question or comment. And I agree with the new TA coming on. I'm not even sure sort of who it is or never met him. So we're looking for a clean slate. But, and I agree, Board of Selectmen, obviously they pick the town administrator, but what role does the finance committee play, if any, to agree to have 2 TA salaries on the books for the next 2 years? I guess that's where I get confused as our role in this process, not to pick the.
Because what they're doing is we don't technically have 2 town administrators. Michael, I think you'll attest to this. We have an executive consultant who's being paid out a contract over a period of 2 years. I explained this the same way to another member of the committee who's not here tonight, that it'd be like if we had a police chief, and I use that as an example. If we were, for some reason, work a negotiated deal out with a police chief that we have, and I love the guy, were to leave, we still got to pay that money, and we still need a police chief. So this is really no different. Michael we're paying a contract out over 2 years. Michael's staying on with the title of executive consultant, but we still need a town administrator. So it just so happens that it's going to wind up in the same line item. And it is what it is. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. It is what it is.
Can I provide a comment in here, or maybe
Sure.
another
You've been
point?
quiet. You've been quiet for way too long. I'm surprised. Go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. How about if I make up for it? Huh? But how about looking at this from another angle, as far as operating budget, paying a town administrator, the active town administrator, no matter who that is. And I'll just call this the current administrator's exit package. Is that really part of an operating budget, or is that one-time money? And are we convoluting this whole thing by putting them together?
So Pat, on that is that the way my contract is written, the revised contract, is that it still falls under that chapter and verse, and it's still paid because it's still a town administrator contract. My role is changing, but it's still under the town administrator. But to your point, if you really dissect this, is that my piece has an end. It is a reoccurring expense for 2 years, but it does have an end, so you can treat it as one-time money because it does have a finite point. But it still has to be funded in an operating budget. That funding can be one-time money, free cash in the future, whatever it may be, just like we're talking the free cash of the $99,000 to go in there. It can be that way.
So, but I also think that looking for the money to fund a maybe a new town administrator is less money than it's going to be to pay the outgoing town administrator. So maybe just looking at it from a little different angle might help things out a little bit.
Meg, you want to say anything about this?
I don't really have anything to add to this per se. I mean, plus, I mean, the other, I guess in my head, the issue, I agree with Michael as to how it needs to be handled. It needs to be paid out of the town administrator line, but whether it's in the town administrator line or whether it's paid out of someplace else, it's either way, it's still in the budget and it still needs to be funded. So I'm not really sure why that's a point that everyone would get hung up on.
Well, the people seem to be getting hung up on how to fund the incoming town administrator. So,
well, I mean, no matter what, whether the outgoing town administrator is paid out of that line or not, we still need to figure out how to fund the incoming town administrator.
This is where we are. It's just got to be done.
Yeah, I get that, Pat. It does have to be done. However, it has to be done because we didn't have a plan for it and because we didn't choose alternatives that were more cost effective, given the climate we're in. So I'm not, it's not, I get it, it has to be done, but this is a self-created circumstance. It's not something that happened without our knowledge. It's not something that happened by accident. Individuals made a choice to put us in this position, and then those same individuals had the choice to make a more cost-effective option available, and they didn't make that choice, and now they're not coming to FinCom to say, let's collaborate on a solution to this problem. So although I recognize it is what it is and we've got to do it and we're all going to have to arrive at that conclusion, it's a very big pill to swallow. And it's not easy to come up with $160,000 in this budget, and I know you know that. So I'm not implying you don't, but
the 2-year exit package is a big pill to swallow too. You know, and nobody seems to be having a problem with that.
Well, because there was a contract in place for that so-called exit package. That contract's been in place.
With that,
right?
You know, so I mean, maybe they could have, the negotiations didn't have to go that big either. You know, so
a 4-year contract. There was 4 years left in the contract.
Just depends on how you look at it, I guess.
I think we got a bargain. There was 4 years in the contract. He took half.
Well, there's some, you know, there's more to it than that, but let's, you know, but we can't get.
I have to jump in there because there's not more to it than that. Is that let's be clear? Is that and this is one of the questions that I received from the chairman of one of the finance committee people. Is that let's be very clear. I had 4.5 years left of my contract. I've received very positive reviews every year annually. Never had a negative review. Every action that I've done has been with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, with their objectives that are there. I've never had a lawsuit directed at me individually. I've been named as well as others in lawsuits. This whole issue with the Plymouth Street, again, there's no fine from DEP, and something that I was not involved in that was there. There's been no issue with the work that I've been done throughout the process. So, you know, I just caution you, don't go down a road that doesn't exist. Now, have we seen selectmen in social media ask for me to leave? Well, you know, again, you've got to take a look at that issue.
I mean, yeah, I know that's what I mean too. But you know, we've got both pieces here, and they got to be taken care of. Neither one of them was basically known probably 6 months ago. So they're both there. They both have to be dealt with and funded. So that's just what we have to do.
And again, I think that I would have expected some dialogue between March 3rd or whenever that meeting was and April 14th about how we're going to fund this town administrator. And it hasn't happened. And they're taking a vote tomorrow morning on a $160,000 commitment. That to me is it's incomprehensible given the circumstances that we're under with COVID-19. The justification for making the decision now is COVID-19. And yet COVID-19 is going to impact this decision in this town more so than anything else we've ever faced. And they're moving forward with the contract regardless and haven't sat down with the FinCom to have a discussion about how this can be funded. They haven't even introduced the idea. I don't know. Again, Mr. Chair, please correct me if I'm wrong, but haven't even introduced the idea of revisiting the operational budget for fiscal year 21 to fund it the right way. And we're going to go to town meeting and we're going to present them with, if we proceed as such, we're going to go to town meeting, we're going to present them with an operational budget for fiscal year 21 that we know the night we're sitting there might as well be ripped up because we've got to come up with $160,000 that, you know, represents roughly 8% of the total general government budget, and we have no idea where it's going to come from.
And Adam, I guess I would add to that. Obviously, I asked the question earlier, but I sit here now, and Michael, you're on, and we don't have all the players, so we can't get too deep into this, or probably none of our business, I guess. But I'm sitting here. I don't know, Michael, if you were looking to leave or if you were pushed out. I honestly don't know the answer to that question. I'm not asking you to answer right now. But Pat, to your question there, we're saying it's done. We got to adjust to it, but is it final and done? A lot has changed to Adam's point. COVID-19, we're in a pandemic. Tough decisions lie ahead. Are all these decisions final in, I guess, the best interest of the town, right? That's, I guess, a question that we can take away from here. And Michael, you don't need to answer it now, but Alan, I guess that's my overarching question as a finance committee member and a taxpayer in town is, are these decisions final in light of the world we live in today? And I guess it is. I don't know.
I have to say that it's my absolute firm belief that the select board is doing what they feel is the best that they can do. And I believe that they believe in what they're doing. It's their job. Just like we're sitting here having this discussion and people that are saying what they're saying believe in what they're saying. So I certainly don't want to make it look like the select board doesn't care about the town. I don't believe that for 1 second. I think they're doing what they truly believe to be in the best interest of Carver. I think that we were, to answer your question, Pat Keneally, I think that we were told we would be more involved in the process along the way, opining on questions we might have before the interviews even began. Everybody got a copy of the letter that ended up not ever going out because that got changed. Then we were supposed to go in and have a discussion before they took the original vote. That got changed. So with all due respect to the select board, every time we were let in a little bit as a FinCom, we were then subsequently pushed out so that it stayed within their complete purview of doing what they did. So again, it's their job to do the hiring. It's our job to work with the individual they hired. I don't want any discussion tonight coming across to sound like it's directed at any individual. And that's extraordinarily important to me. And I won't allow it. I'll actually mute you and knock you right out of the meeting. So, because it's not going to, we are not a political group. Our job here is to benefit and watch over the taxpayers' monies and make sure that money is spent appropriately. I think what Adam is asking is 100% what the FinCom is supposed to do. And the fact that somebody says we can go ahead and transfer money out of the lunch money fund that was overinflated to start with so that we don't have to come back to FinCom and ask them for any money, I think just gets around the process. We're breaking into the piggy bank that's in the closet because the piggy bank that's out on the floor is under the purview of the FinCom. And I understand and I don't. And I think this is not a normal circumstance. This is a big deal. This is a new guy that's being hired regardless of who it is. And we're dealing with furloughs and budget freezes and potential other problems coming up, as well as the possibility of a special town meeting sometime in September, October, God only knows when the true numbers come out and we find ourselves in a situation. So could this have been handled a little bit differently? I certainly would have liked to have seen it handled a little bit differently. I don't think there was any gun to anybody's head to get this done. Oh, woe is me, the sky is falling tomorrow morning. That's just my personal input.
So Pat, to answer your question,
Pat.
Yeah, and Pat, if I could just provide a little detail in here, is clearly the Board of Selectmen and myself, we have a legally binding contract that two parties agreed to. I had always offered to extend that. And this is the date that the unanimously was agreed to by the Board of Selectmen. And as I said earlier, if this process had gotten delayed with bringing on the new town administrator, I was willing to continue services as a town administrator until the Board of Selectmen could properly go into whatever that new direction is for whatever time it took. So again, that's always been on the table. It does appear that they have somebody that they've offered the position to. And, we should know tomorrow whether or not that contract's going to happen before the 17th. If it doesn't happen before the 17th, then the board's going to have to make some action and we'll have to see what that is. But right now, I think we're anticipating a contract being approved tomorrow.
So if that being said, are you all set, Adam?
Yeah.
I know you're frustrated. We all are, but there's only so
Yes.
much we can. There's only so far we can go with it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So
And Alan, I guess to your point, now obviously this is a hot button topic, right? And I think, part of being on the FinCom and being involved locally is because we do have passion for this, and it's nothing personal against any board members or the new TA that's coming in. It's just
Oh.
questions we want to ask, just to kind of piggyback what you had said earlier. So it's a hot topic, and it's an
I
important.
think we have a right to ask it. I think it's our job.
It is. That's what I've been saying since day one.
That's the way I see it. It's our job. If we're not here to rubber stamp stuff, it's our job. In fact, the next
We have a
item we're gonna
responsibility.
take- Well, the next item we're going to take is to support conservation in money that's in a land acquisition fund that 5 members talk about no oversight. 5 members, and I'm one of the members of conservation, have complete control of with no other oversight. No town meeting, no finance committee, no capital outlay, no selectmen, no nobody. 5 guys decide we're going to buy something. They happen to have $616,000 in an account that's getting money put into it from the tax rollbacks, and most of that is a result of solar. So I'm going to break right into that. FinCom at our last meeting, Wednesday, voted unanimously. There was 4 members present, 4-0.
The Conservation Commission.
Conservation? Yeah.
Conservation. What did I say?
FinCom.
Sorry.
Conservation.
Sorry. Thank you for correcting me.
You said FinCom.
Conservation voted to move $500,000 out of that fund and allow the selectmen to request the governor, request the legislature to transfer that money into the restricted fund. So I'll give you a quick Reader's Digest version of this account. It was approved in 2002 by the legislature, and it was for a land acquisition fund, which was growing very slowly at the beginning simply because it was designed to have the rollback taxes put into it. Well, now with the solar agreements, that money has grown exponentially. We got $480,000 has been added to that account since 2015. So in the last 5 years. So the fund has grown to $616,000. So
That's the balance today?
that's the balance today. So my argument was, both from a moral standpoint as well as from a member of the Conservation Commission and a little bit of the FinCom in me also, was that I don't believe any board, especially an appointed board, which we all are also, of 5 members requiring a 3-person vote for a majority would have total control with no oversight over that kind of money. I'm sorry, I just don't. Ultimately, they agreed. We offered to move the 500,000. We're simply taking a vote to support that decision. It really doesn't even need to come to us, but we're in support of it so that the selectmen can now write a letter to the governor saying, Conservation has done this. In support of the Conservation Commission, the Select Board with the Finance Committee are asking the governor to file legislation to let this happen. Going forward, Conservation Committee is going to have a meeting to determine if we're going to institute a floor and a ceiling to this account. And then there was some talk from one of the members, I think it was Savory, that would like to see additional safeguards built into it. So it looks like it's going to involve either FinCom or Capital Outlay or FinCom and the Select Board, so that it just isn't 5 guys having a beer and 3 decide to buy a piece of land. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. You can elaborate a little more if you want to, Michael or Meg.
So everything Alan said is correct. Normally because it was done as a state act, it has to go back to the state legislature. Normally this would have been done at town meeting to ask for a home rule petition. But since we don't have a town meeting scheduled, we're not having one yet, we wanted to move these funds in anticipation of a future town meeting that may need the money to solve a funding gap in FY21 due to COVID-19. So in essence, we're asking the governor to act to allow the Conservation Commission, where the funds are stored, with the approval of the Finance Committee and the approval of the selectmen, who will file the bill to the governor, to have him approve that bill to go forward. We believe normally they don't do things like this, but we are in COVID-19. And in essence, the three boards we're looking at as acting as town meeting, requesting the governor to file a home rule petition on our behalf, which in this case is called a governor's bill. So it's important we get a unanimous vote from all the parties, to transfer that money. And as Alan said, is that no one ever anticipated that it would grow to this level. It's just that based upon the solar projects that we have and how they've been coming online, it has added to this fund a lot quicker than anyone anticipated. And as Meg and I were looking through our budget and trying to figure out if we need money, where's it going to come from? This one was the one that started, beeping bright red. That's like beep, beep, beep. This is the fund we've got to figure out how to undo. And that's where we are. And again, you have a unanimous vote from the Concom recommending and approving this be taken away from them that they had sole control over. You've got the Board of Selectmen that unanimously approved this, and we're looking for the FinCom just as boots and suspenders to support those decisions.
So based on that, Meg, by the way, her iPad died. So she sent me a quick text saying, sorry, I'm down to like 1% toodaloo. So that was the end of that. Anybody have any questions on this? I'll take a motion. Don't everybody jump in at once.
I'll make a motion to approve the transfer for the $500,000 from the Conservation Committee Fund.
Second.
It's the Conservation Land Fund, Land Acquisition Fund, and we're making a motion to support the Conservation Commission's decision.
Okay, I make a motion to support the Conservation Commission's decision.
There you go.
Transfer the $500,000 from the Conservation Committee Land Transfer Fund.
Land Acquisition Fund.
Land Acquisition Fund. I'm sorry, guys.
I didn't
write it down.
I'll give you, Kelly, if you need it. Don't worry. I'll give you the accurate thing of it. It's hard to follow those sometimes. Marie, did you second that?
Yes, I did, Alan. Yep.
About time you said something tonight. Motion made and second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. I said something else.
Opposed? Carried. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 to 0. You can let the selectmen know tomorrow, Michael, that we voted to support that also.
I will. I'm just trying to get the bill out of the town council. We'll sign it and send it up hopefully tomorrow. I do have to just regress here for a second. Is, my screen set up so it looks like the Brady Bunch. Everybody's in a small little window.
Mine too.
And, one of my top 10, proud things that I'm leaving the town with is what I'm looking at here. Because when I came into the town, there was 3 or 4 people on the Finance Committee that had been there for years and had gotten beaten up. And it was particularly a group that all hung out together. They were relatively friends, so to speak. But I look at the screen right now and I see diversity. I see age diversity. I see sexual diversity. I see, liberals, conservatives. I see all of that. And this is a great representation. And you guys should be proud is that you represent the entire town because you hit every aspect of it. And you have a lot of power and influence. And, used judiciously is that, I think it's going to help as we transition with 2 new members of the selectmen being elected. You guys are going to have a lot of say in what happens, and I would encourage you to do that. So getting off of that soapbox, while we're talking about funding, I just want to run over a few numbers just so you have what we've been able to put aside in the last 6 years so that we can, again, weather storms like this, and separate accounts that we've set up for special needs when we've had one-time funding. So again, these are accounts that are set up to deal with special events that would be out of the ordinary that could be addressed. So, this year we're going to have $1.3 million of free cash. That's already been programmed. We have that in the town meeting budget. The North Carver Water District, we have $411,000 of retained earnings. That's to help offset future debt. We have $198,000 in the Cranberry Village retained earnings. Retained earnings for enterprise funds are basically free cash. They stay in there. Actually, it's better to describe them as stabilization funds. So those two are more like stabilization funds. The CPA undesignated funds, we have $479,000. Your reserve fund still has $77,000 in it. Our stabilization account is $3.2 million. Our capital and debt stabilization fund still has $1.1 million in it. Our OPED, we put in $1.2 million. Now, that might have went down a little bit to the stock market, but when I came on board, that was zero. We have, based upon our auditors, we have what's called a compensated absentee trust fund. I think at one point, because of union contracts and other contracts, there's $600,000 of liability. We now have $146,000 in that. We have our FEMA storm reserve of $205,000. George, when you were on the phone that you stopped off, we have that so it can fund future storms while we wait the 2 years for the feds to pay us back. That's old Fed money that we've come in, but instead of burning that in the operation budget, we kept it in a reserve. We have a health insurance reserve account of $250,000 and then another $100,000 in case there's something catastrophic that happens in healthcare. What could that be? All of a sudden we have a bunch of teachers and young people come off of the age 25 plan and they have to get their own plan. Or we have people whose spouses lose their employment and they were on their spouse's employees roll and now they have to jump on the town. So we have that available to deal with those unanticipated. I mean, Pat knows what it was like dealing with that in the past. We have an unemployment reserve of about $99,000. We have a utility reserve of $175,000. We have a special ed reserve of $294,000. That's for the school to use for unanticipated special ed issues. We have a health insurance mitigation account of $256,000 that goes to the employees to help offset copays that they put into the thing through savings we've done through contract negotiations for healthcare. We have a salary adjust account of $115,000. The capital reserve is $264,000, but we just transferred $200,000 out of that. There's $230,000 in the circuit breaker account with the schools. Snow and ice reserves, and these are reserves for bad years. We have $130,000 in there. So those are just some of the items that we've been able to preserve and add to over the years. Wait a minute, a couple more. Obviously, the Conservation Land Acquisition Trust Fund, $616. We just used $600 out of that. We have a water betterment stabilization to offset future debt payments of $200,000. We have several $100,000 in our solar revolving account. The earth removal committee that collects money for sand moved around has $191,000. They take money out of that and give to DPW to do road repairs. Let's see. We have $150,000 with CDBG funds that can be used for other economic development or housing projects. Well, that's enough. So the point being is some of those funds that I've listed is where we came up that we could tap into in an emergency if we had to get to that $4.4 million of liquidity to deal with any type of major catastrophes. So these are all like mini stabilization accounts that are for anomalies that we don't budget in our operating budget. So our operating budgets are very lean, and they're able to be lean because we have these other funds available.
I want to mention, since we're on that funding that's there, and I made the statement, I put it out on Facebook. You said at the last selectmen's meeting, because obviously the keyboard warriors on Facebook went crazy with the water line that's going down Plymouth Street. You said that is going to be completed no matter what, and then I reiterated that on Facebook, that water line is much needed, it's long overdue, and it's vital, and it is going to happen. That is correct. We do have the funding for that.
So yes, and a little bit more detail on that. And again, despite what you read,
that's why I'm bringing it up.
Yeah, there are no fines that DEP is going to level. What was identified is there was a communication error between the LSP and the town health agent that didn't put anybody in harm. We have committed to, and we have funded the design and permitting contract to design and permit that water main. Now, we also put in there, because there are new contaminants that DEP keeps on, if you will, adding to their list of things to deal with. And one of them is called PFAS. And PFAS is pretty much going to be in every landfill. And it's actually used in, firefighting. And so we're anticipating that at some point in the next year, that's going to be triggered, and we're going to have to test for that. In the meantime, what we have done in that design contract is we added 2 additional roads, Captain Pierce Road and I think it's Hayes Road, if we needed to do an addendum to add those to it. Today, we actually started testing additional houses beyond where we are right now. Again, no house has had contamination that exceeded DEP's allocation or what their allotment is. But what we started to do was additional testing beyond the area that we were required to. And today we did find some additional hits that are beyond the areas we've talked about. And with that, the agent and I extended the design contract to include those 2 other roads that we already had a price for. So now they're doing all of those roads and anticipating water's going to have to be done for those. Now, that's also going to require replacing the culvert that crosses Plymouth Street right there, where I think it's Moneybrook River that goes under there. That was built in like 1802 with just granite slabs. And the problem is you can't run water through there because you don't get the frost protection. And those slabs, eventually are starting to cave in. So we're going to rebuild that as well. We're anticipating all of the design work, the permitting will all be completed probably by January, February of this coming year. We'll put it out to bid. We'll get final bid numbers before town meeting. and then at town meeting in 2021, next April, is that there will be a line item to fund the construction contract that we'll have a definitive number for at that time. And whether that comes out of, excuse me, the capital and debt stabilization fund, whether that comes out of potentially surplus free cash, whether that comes out of, the general stabilization fund, somehow that's going to have to be funded then, but you will have those numbers at that point. I do believe it could be funded out of the capital and debt stabilization fund. If there's not enough free cash available, free cash would be the ideal thing to do. It's a one-time project, but at the same time, the capital and debt stabilization fund will be there. So the construction project will have to be funded at next year's town meeting, but the design contract and permitting and bid specs contract is already funded to date.
That way it gets it out there a second time now. So that this will be in our meeting minutes, and it will also be when this gets put out on Area 58 and YouTube, so that hopefully it'll settle down some of the misinformation. I'll use that. That's a nice word.
Yeah, I mean, just to put it in perspective, if hypothetically, Adam, you're building, you buy 10 acres of land, and you divide it into 5 house lots. And you're putting the 5 house lots in there, and each one of them has and it's in the middle of some cranberry bog somewhere. And you do your water testing, and your water testing comes in at 0.299, and the EPA threshold or DEP threshold is 0.3. They would say, no problem. Drink all the water you want because you didn't trigger our threshold of 0.3. Now, the property that we're talking about, some of the thresholds came in at one hit that we've never been able to repeat came in at 0.29, but the other ones came in at like 0.01, 0.02, 0.03. I mean, 0.002. They all came in at a smaller number, and again, none of them ever triggered the 3, except for what I just talked about today for the additional properties we've done. But because it's next to a landfill, then DEP takes the stance that the landfill contaminated somebody's water that should have been entitled to clean water. Even though we say you can drink it up to 0.3, we expect you to clean their water up. And that's in essence what we're doing. And so if the town did contaminate the water, which we have to assume they did, the town has an obligation to clean up that area. And although it's safe to drink, according to DEP, we are going to put in the water line to solve that because we're more afraid of the future contaminants than this one in particular. Alan,
Hold on, everybody. I'm trying to bring George back in. Hold on.
Pat, how's your new house?
New house, I'm in my new office area. The new house is great. Especially after I got the tree off of it.
Pat, how's your neighbors?
I got some great neighbors, Adam. You know that.
Are you guys live with each other?
Adam, I can walk outside and see Adam's house.
Yeah, we could throw a football back and forth.
Oh, that's funny. Now, Pat, I see Adam's house is decorated. He's got a bunch of dogs on the shades there, or stenciled on there. Where's your dogs?
I don't have any decorative dogs. I have a little pug in the other room, but that's about what I got.
And my wife picked these valances, I guess they're called.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Was a difficult decision, but she won. I wanted something a little bit more neutral. She fell in love with bees, so this is what we have in the office.
You got every breed up there. You should be fine.
We do have them all. There's quite a few of them. There's 3 windows in here, so I have 3 different 3 different pattern configurations to look at. So, but it's a great neighborhood for sure, and a lot of new neighbors. So we're all getting to learn each other and know each other, and quite a few of the folks in here have been here less than 5 years.
Yeah.
So it's quite nice. And Pat's my closest neighbor because the gentleman in between us, him and his wife, go to Florida every year for about 6 or 8 months. So we barely see them. So
They're not back yet. No.
they're not back yet.
No.
We have a rule in the FinCom that you cannot, it's a conflict of interest if you're like neighbors within 500 feet of one another. So one of you's got to go. Sorry. George, there he is. Hold on. For some reason, George got booted. We don't really know why. So now he's coming back in. There he is.
Hey, George.
George.
He may not have audio yet.
George, this better be good.
Hello, George. Hello, George. There he is, connecting.
Hey,
Hi, George.
Hi, George.
Get back.
We missed you.
Thank you.
Just in time to adjourn.
Outstanding. I just wanted to make sure. I didn't do it on purpose. I don't know what the hell happened. So.
No, we lost Kevin. I don't know where Kevin went. There's a name place, but that's it. I think somebody shut his camera off. There he is. Kevin, did you shut your camera off? Well, I guess so. Kevin's out. We're dropping like flies here. All right, that's all I got. Any committee member comments? Anybody else?
I have one, if I
Go
could.
ahead.
I don't want to keep people for another 20 minutes, but
We're here. That's all right. You and Beth can chat till, midnight or so. You're both working from home now.
I just wanted to.
Alan.
I wanted to take a couple minutes and quickly recognize and acknowledge that this will be our last FinCom meeting before Michael rides off into the sunset. So officially on Friday. So, Michael, we've had the chance to work together a little bit on FinCom, but in other areas with recreation and the school building project and things of that nature as well. And I just wanted to take an opportunity to say thank you very much for 6 years of dedicated service to the town of Carver. It wasn't easy for you. It wasn't easy for some members of the community as well, as we all know. It's been quite a ride, quite a roller coaster. But we are in a far better position today than we were 6 years ago when you stepped into town hall. We would not have a school today if you hadn't joined us. We would not have gotten that project done on time and under budget. We would not have gotten the high school project done on time and under budget, as well as the fire station and now the police station. So, I just wanted to say thank you. It has been perfect, but I just wanted to say thank you very, very much for your time, your effort, your passion, and for your dedicated service over the last 6 years. Thank you very, very much, and I wish you the best of luck going forward.
Thanks a lot, Adam. And for those that don't know, when Adam and I first met, Adam was, shall I say, kind of hired as an enforcer or something like that, or a hitman from a former superintendent that says, you got to go after this guy. He's not doing what I want him to do. And Adam came to a few meetings and asked me 1,000,001 questions. And I think after, a few meetings, you realize that we actually had a good plan. And we actually had, as you said to before, every time we put something together, it's how we're going to fund it. We had a plan to go forward. And it took some convincing and some trust that we had to reestablish in the community after that school project got denied, 3 times. But we made it there. And, I just remember how you first approached it from what you were told. And I respect and appreciate you asking the questions to verify whether anything you were told was true. and you found out that probably 99% wasn't.
Yeah, no, I've learned a lot from you and throughout this experience that you have to ask questions. You have to get the information for yourself. You can't rely on what you've been told necessarily. But putting in the time, the effort, and the investment in the process is what pays dividends. And it's been a pleasure working with you. And you've been a straight shooter since day one. And I think anybody who takes the time to work collaboratively with you has had a positive outcome. So I just want to say thanks.
Thank you.
I want to add my thanks into that too, Michael. I've been working with you since you came on board, I think, on a couple of committees and different projects that we've gone through. And it has been a learning experience for me. I thought I knew everything when I came in here. I didn't know much of anything other than the military, but I really appreciate all of the time you spent with me and educating me on how a town should run and where we go. But
Well,
good luck
George,
in the
I think
future.
we educated each other, and thank you for all your help on the, starting with the fire station building committee. I mean, that's a lot to be proud of, and, you were an integral part of that, and thank you.
Thank you.
Michael, on my part, I haven't known you very long, but thank you for your patience as I've been learning, and I wish you the best, and thank you for your help.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, Michael, it was brief with us, but really impressed of how well you knew the town, how well you knew each line item on that budget. You've had an answer for every question that's been posed to you regarding the budget in any sector of that budget. You've got an answer for everything. Looks like you got along well with the heads of police, fire, DPW as well. So really impressed with the job you did, and thank you for doing that. And good luck.
Thank you. We have a great team in Carver, and I'm glad you brought up all the department heads because it's a team effort, and that's the beauty. There's mutual respect between all of us, and that's how there's mutual respect and trust.
Yep.
And with the department heads, we didn't get involved in politics amongst ourselves. We just got the job done, and thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I want to second Pat. I'm always impressed at all the knowledge that you have, Mike. I just think you did a great job with Carver, and we're going to miss you.
Thank you.
I wish you nothing but the best of luck.
Thank you.
No. The job of a FinCom is to watch out for what's going on, but FinCom is completely useless without information. And working with Michael for the last 2 years and subsequently him allowing me to work with Meg, because he doesn't have to, he can make everything go through him. But allowing me to work with Meg and include him and allowing him to give us the heads up on stuff is what has made the FinCom successful going forward also. I would only hope that the information that we're used to having continues, but I know that the last 2 years, and I've told Meg this several times, we would not be anywhere near as successful a committee as we have been without Michael's help, without Meg's numbers and input and information that we've been provided. So I think that we're going to go on and everything will be good. But the fact is that, Michael, it's really been great working with you, and you're not really going that far because I'm sure we're still going to see you here and there. And but thank you for all the help you've given me as chair and this committee as a whole. It's been the secret to our success as a committee.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So with that, if there's nothing else, we can do this. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. Is there any further discussion? With that, everybody, Michael, do you want to jump back in?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Thought I saw your hand up. Oh, you were raising it. You were clapping. I understand. Okay.
There we go.
He wasn't really clapping. He raised his hand to speak is what I thought it was. All right. Motion made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Yeah.